Thanks very much, Monica. And it's a great pleasure for me also to be here this evening to talk to you about some of these things. I've only got 25 minutes, and in 25 minutes, I can only really scratch the surface, if that, of what is a complex and evolving issue. But I'm very pleased to say there are lots of experts on this call today who do this for a living, probably beyond 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but who do it throughout the working week and working year. And I know that they will also contribute answers to the questions that you may have, if not during this session, then subsequently, because what I'm hoping to do this evening is very much open up a discussion rather than give you a fixed solution. I've got about 14 slides or so that I want to quickly rattle through just to give a broad overview of some of the issues as I see them. As I say, it's very much a partial view, so I'll be very grateful for your insights also into key issues and trends that you think are important. So I'm hoping that everybody can see the slide that I've just loaded onto the screen. Can you see that?
I can see them here. I hope everybody else can.
Yeah, I can too.
Okay, so if you can't, if you could just let us know, that would be great, and then maybe we can try and find a way for you to see them.
Okay, Hugh, do you want me to leave my camera on so you've got somebody who's nodding, or you're happy for me to just turn it off?
I'm happy either way, but that would be great. Thanks, Monica. So I'm going to talk to you, as I say, for 20-25 minutes about leadership skills of the future. And there are two broad areas that I want to talk about. The first of these is about the context within which leadership is happening now and will need to happen in the future. To make this easy, I've arranged it under a series of headings which follow the alphabetical order A, B, C, D, E. I've done that because my experience of trying to convey a message in government and before that in universities led me to believe that it was never what I said or what I wrote or what I did that was important. It was what people heard, what they remembered and what they did afterwards. And one way of doing that is to arrange the messaging that you're trying to convey in a way in which it makes it easy for people to remember. So I'm going to be talking in a minute about the context within which our leadership needs to be demonstrated under this alphabet of headings A, B, C, D, E: ageing, Brexit, climate change, digital changes and economic growth. And then I want to go from the very broad to the very narrow and talk about what these changes might mean for us as individuals or parts of teams or parts of larger organisations. And here I want to talk about a countdown, a set of numbers of things that you might want to consider. Again, I've tried to make this easy to remember. So I'm going to talk to you about the 4 drives that we should all be thinking about in everything that we do at work and outside of work. Say something about the stages of our lives and how those are changing and what that might mean for the way in which we approach those 4 drives. Then a little bit about our 2 lives. Maybe we have more than 2 lives, but I wanted to talk about the breadth within which learning and leadership needs to take place. And then finally, I'd like to start the conversation with you about what you're going to do next in response to some of these changes, pressures and issues. So let's start with the first of these things, the ABC of context. And the first of the letters that we've got on the screen is A for ageing. Now, what I hope you can see on this screen is a chart which attempts to demonstrate how the population is changing in Wales. These numbers and this graph come from the censuses which were conducted in 2011 and then again in 2021. And what they demonstrate is that the population in Wales, like the population across the UK, is ageing. There are more people than ever before in the older age groups. Over 1/5, that's 21% of the Welsh population in 2021, just a year ago, were aged 65 years or over. That's 662,000 people in a population which is only 3.21 million. So a very large proportion of the population are older, and that's set to increase for at least the next 10 or more years. And within that population, there's a growing number of people who are very much older. The size of the population aged 90 years and over has grown to 1%. So that's 29,000. 700 people. It's increased from 25,200 in 2011. Now, these numbers are interesting, and you may have seen evidence of these changes in your own family, growing number of older relatives or older friends. But the important thing for me is what it means for the nature of the work that needs to be done in Wales, and the nature of where the workforce is coming from, and what supports might need to be made available to them. The implications of these changes is that there's going to be an ever increasing demand for health and social care workers to provide the support and care for individuals as they grow older, because as people go older, they're more likely to have health conditions, and in many instances multiple health conditions which require support. Also, it's likely that that people will need to find different ways of working. There's some evidence to suggest, particularly over the last year or two, that the number of people over the age of 50 who are retiring early or withdrawing from the labour force has increased significantly. And it's been suggested that that could be reduced if greater attention was placed by employers on offering more flexible forms of employment, part-time jobs, term time only working, other forms of more flexible working, including, as we're doing this evening, working from home. At least many of us will be. So that's the ageing population. We can talk about that a bit more later in the questions. Let's move on to Brexit, because what's happening with Brexit is putting this ageing issue into sharp relief. There have been reductions, as you will have seen in the news, in the number of people coming to the UK, particularly those coming from other EU nations. There have been increases in the number of people coming from other parts of the world, but there's certainly been a decline in net migration overall. And many people would have us believe that the Brexit referendum was about migration and about the desire of some sections of the population to see that reduce. One consequence of this has been that employers are finding it increasingly hard, they would argue, or many would argue, to recruit the workforce that they need. It's only 2 days ago that the head of the CBI was asking for immigration controls to be relaxed in order to allow more people to come into the UK. And Keir Starmer and others across the political spectrum have been suggesting that no, that's not the way that things should go. Rather than relaxing immigration rules, employers will need to raise wages, provide more flexible jobs, and train more, in order to not have to change the migration rules. We're already seeing wages going up in several sectors. In parts of hospitality and catering, they've risen by as much as 20% in the last year. And there is signs, not least with the increase in the national minimum wage, that these rates will go up further. There's less of a sign of employers engaging in more training. Across the UK, employers undertake about 50% of the level of training that their counterparts or competitors do in other parts of Europe. So it's quite a long way to go in terms of training the workforce or potential workforce in the UK and in Wales to take on jobs. And as you all know, unemployment for those who are seeking work is at the lowest level it's been since 1973. So 50 years ago or more since unemployment was this low, despite the fact that we are in a recession. So what are the skills needs of the future? Considerable skills needs associated with climate change and the pursuit of net zero, although a lot of argument about what those skills might be. And one of the challenges that I faced in government only a couple of months ago was trying to find out what those skills needs were, because there are very few qualifications or changes to qualifications that take on board the different occupational and sectoral needs of this change. So we're expecting to see a greater number of people involved in introducing electrical storage and charging points for cars, and changing houses over to a greater reliance on electricity, skills to insulate housing and businesses, skills to change the way in which cars are serviced and refueled. But what's not yet happened is a full suite of qualifications anywhere in the UK to provide for that. And consequently, a lot of employees, a lot of employers are somewhat at a loss in terms of knowing what might be needed. And there's a lot of learning by doing. I think that's going to change in the next 2 or 3 years. I think those people who are prepared for that, who take advantage of the emerging qualifications, not least in the quality assurance of some of these initiatives, are going to be well placed to take advantage of the increased revenue and funding that doubtless go into industries associated with managing this change. The next of our ABC of a challenge, or ABC of context, is the digital change. What you've got on this slide is an indication of jobs growth. Now, there are 2 parts to anticipating how jobs and careers will change in the future. The first, and arguably the most important, is getting an understanding of where people will be leaving the labour market, so that you can get a sense of what they call the replacement demand. We have an ageing workforce in a range of sectors, particularly in engineering and in construction, in logistics, and in some aspects of media. And the replacement demand there is considerable. But beyond that, we also have sectors and occupations which are growing rapidly. And what this slide is demonstrating is that by far and away the largest area of growth in terms of new jobs and new skills requirement is in the information technology and digital arena, where jobs growth across the UK will be double the level of other sectors, and that includes caring and personal services. It includes parts of the public sector, business, finance and related areas. So very much an issue here about making sure that individuals develop their digital skills as they go through. It's not just about people going into new jobs which are solely about this. It's about augmenting the skills requirements and the skills provision for people in existing jobs. I've just spent much of today going through a series of online courses on cybersecurity and authentication, and that sort of thing is very much going to be the bread and butter of what's happening in lots of organisations. So providing people with those opportunities to enhance their skills online, supporting them in doing that, purchasing, requisitioning or pointing people in the direction of these things is going to be as important as making sure that organisations are restructuring how they do things in light of these technological developments. So that's digital. Let's move on then to the more sobering of the alphabet of challenge or alphabet of context, which is the need for economic growth. So I'm hoping that you can see a slide which provides a graph of forecasts of economic growth in different parts of the world over the course of the next 40 years or so. And what's particularly concerning to many politicians and civil servants of the sort that I used to work with is the very low levels of growth forecast for the UK when you compare that with other parts of the world. The Euro area, where growth is scheduled to be somewhat higher, America or the United States, where it's higher still, China, higher yet, and then finally a large number of developing economies that have historically performed less well per person or as a nation states than the UK or parts of the EU, but are within the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, where growth is again seen to be higher. One of the challenges that you'll have seen mentioned in the press and media is the extent to which the UK has a plan for growth. We've had periods in the past when the UK had an empire and imperial preference, so that nations within the British Empire were forced to buy goods and services from the UK, and particularly higher value ones in exchange for the UK purchasing raw materials. We've been through a period of 30 years within which the UK was part of the single market of the European Union. and that was part of its growth strategy. What's not yet wholly clear is what the growth strategy is for the next 30 or 40 years. We had a brief period recently under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, where the intention was to create Singapore on Thames, to create more of a free market, small nation on the outskirts of the European Union, trading with less regulation and greater free movement. That didn't succeed. What we need to do now in Wales and the wider UK is get a sense of how our economic growth is going to be provided in the future. For that to happen, economic growth is built on productivity improvement. The bulk of productivity improvement is based on improvements in the effectiveness of people at work and the quality and price of the services and goods that they're able to sell. Wales has not had an enormously impressive track record in this area. The hope from amongst my colleagues in Welsh Government was that through selective investment, particularly by bringing research and innovation activity to Wales, that it would be possible to spawn growth in the longer run. We see signs of that with the semiconductors application catapult in Newport, the movement of the Office for National Statistics to Newport, the investment in the Global Centre for Rail Excellence in and around Neath Talbot, the continued development of research capability for Airbus, both in Broughton in North Wales, but also close to Wales in Bristol and in parts of Newport. That type of initiative is a conscious effort on the part of the UK and Welsh governments to seed economic growth built on high skills and knowledge intensive and research intensive industry. Now that's reflected in the Cardiff Capital Region with its priority sectors, and 2 days ago the Cardiff Capital Region Regional Skills Partnership launched its skills plan for the next 3 years. That's shortly to be available online at the link that you can see at the bottom of this slide. And what that report does is outline what's happening at a government level and through a collective employer activity in the southeast of Wales to encourage stronger growth in advanced materials and manufacturing, in compound semiconductors, in more modular and more technologically informed forms of construction, in creative and media, in fintech, building on the cluster of fin insurance companies that operate across South Wales, and then on the human foundational economy of health and social care. So I've taken you through the ABCDE of challenge or of context. What I want to do is then move on in the next 5 or 10 minutes to talk about what that might mean for us as individuals, as part of teams, or as part of organisations. So here I'm talking to you about the countdown for your career, and I want to raise a few questions for you to reflect upon. So as we count down from 4 to 1, we're going to be talking about drives, stages, lives, and you as a person. Let's start with the first of those, your 4 drives. Now, in Japan, there's a concept called ikigai. Ikigai is used as a way of encouraging people to think about the things that they do in their life, to think about what they love doing, what they're good at, what the world might need people to do, and what they can be paid for. You can see on this chart, and you can hear in a longer lecture on the link at the bottom of this slide, about how these different aspects of your lives overlap and intersect with one another. The sweet spot for many Japanese people, and for others increasingly around the world, is to find your ikigai, that point in which what you're good at aligns with what you love doing, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Not everybody can achieve that at all points in their lives and all areas of the work that they do. And you can see how combining 2 or more of these things might reveal something about your vocation, your profession, your mission, or your passion. But the argument in Ikigai is that those people who can find that sweet spot will be happier in the long term and will have more fulfilling lives. Okay, so while you're reflecting on what your ikigai might be, and I strongly encourage you to write down these questions and perhaps think about what the answers might be, if not in this session, then afterwards and in days to come. While you're doing that, I'm going to move us on to the next of our countdown, number 3, which is about stages in your life. And during the course of my life, the stages I'm very aware of have changed somewhat, but I'm not sure that the script has always changed as rapidly. My grandparents would tell me some years ago that they left school at 12 and started their careers then. And so childhood for that generation at the beginning of the 20th century ran from 0 to 12. Then they were expected to become young adults. In the post-war period, for my parents, teenagers were invented and they didn't leave school to 16 or 18. Very small number of them would go on to university to study to the age of 21, which is what I did in the 1980s. As the father of 4 children, it is a source of pride, but also a financial concern that my young children, or not that young anymore, rarely leave education until they're 24 or more. So I would argue that childhood and youth are being extended. It's more than doubled in 100 years. That means new scripts, new ways of thinking about what people can do during that period, so that they're better prepared for what comes later, but also so that they're not unduly stressed or strained by that their mental health and well-being is not affected by them setting unrealistic expectations for themselves or their peers, or indeed their parents doing that unconsciously for them. Again, moving on to adulthood, as I mentioned a moment ago, for my grandparents' generation, that often began at 13 and ran to their mid-50s, because life expectancy at the beginning of the 20th century was not that long. Many people died before they got to retirement. Average life expectancy at the beginning of the 1900s was something like 57 or 58. Clearly, a lot of that average was reduced by childhood mortality, but still for many, the prospects of a long retirement were not there. Today, as generations prepare to go to work at the age of 24, the statutory retirement age currently stands at 67, but it's set to be reviewed and extended. I'm very much hoping that it doesn't move before I get to 67, not that many years away from now. And then finally, we move to older age. Again, that's shifted on a bit. I was told recently that 60 is the new 40. There's a lot of talk about people working longer in life, and indeed many do, but if you look at average retirement ages, the point at which most people withdraw from the labour market, it's not at 67, it's not at 65, and in many ways it's actually been reducing over time as more people are able to take advantage of private pensions or windfalls through inheritance or other such things. Now, clearly that's not true for everyone, but it is true for a significant minority and possibly soon a majority. Now, what this says to me is that we need to think about lifelong learning and think about how our learning needs, both as employees, but also as children and as older adults, might change. In Welsh Government, we're busy putting together a range of financial packages and support to help people in different stages. For those up to the age of 24, a range of financial supports in the form of grants and loans for people in further education and higher education. Dependent on household income, much of that was geared towards making sure that while people studied on a full-time basis or a part-time basis, that their income didn't fall below the national minimum wage. The supports available from Welsh Government extend to part-time learning for undergraduate and postgraduate learning. That's not the case in the same way in England. Many people don't know this, both on the providing side of education and training, but also on the studying side. And I would strongly encourage people to visit sites like the Student Finance Wales site or the Welsh Government site, and you can see a link for that on this page, to look at the wide range of sources of funding that are available currently for lifelong learning, and there are plans to extend that in 2024. So we're counting down. We've done 4 and 3, and we're on to 2. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is is massively important as people think about lifelong learning, that they also think about life-wide learning, that they think about learning that's not just for work and improving their skills and their earnings, but it's also about learning for fulfillment and learning for well-being and learning to hopefully get a better understanding of ourselves, our families, our friends, our place in society, and the contribution that we can make in those environments. There are a range of supports available to help people with this. There are personal learning accounts, there's adult and community learning available in Wales. The personal learning accounts are small sums of money to help people do short, career-focused courses that will help them move from a particular occupation or a particular sector to another one. So it's not just about the skills of the job that you're doing now or the one that's immediately in front of you in the organisation that you work for. It's also about the skills that you might need if you decide to have a career change or something of that sort. There's a parallel scheme called React, soon to be React Plus, which provides funding for people who have been made redundant, or rather whose jobs have been made redundant and want some funding to help them to develop skills for a job similarly in another occupation or another sector, or indeed going back to the same area of work, perhaps for a different employer. So that's something about two lives, and encouraging people to think life-wide. I know as I've got older, I've increasingly thought consciously about these things and found many benefits from doing that. So would like to encourage a conversation about that later in this session. And then the last of my countdown is one. One is the person, it's you. It's about how this is going to happen. You're not on your own. There's lots of support out there. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But the person who's going to make any of this happen ultimately is going to be you. And that's why there's a mirror on this slide. But you're not on your own, as I said a moment ago. There's support available through Careers Wales. It's primarily focused on the Careers Wales branding on the needs of young people up to and including the age of 24, but there is a service provided by Careers Wales called Working Wales, which is very much focused on the needs of people in work or recently out of work. So if there are issues that I've touched on this evening that you'd like to explore in more detail, you'll probably find good advice and guidance there. And if it's not on the website, they're available by telephone, by chat, and in person through a network of offices and pop-up centres across Wales. And beyond that, there are 13 colleges in Wales and 8 universities spread across Wales to meet the needs of a population in different ways in different places, and again providing courses not just on a full-time basis but also on a part-time basis. And I know that Monica and Lisa and Sian and Jerry will be able to say a bit more about the part-time courses that are available at USW in the business area and in hospitality and catering through learning at work or in leadership and coaching and development. I won't attempt to demonstrate how little I know about the detail of those courses, but they do come highly recommended. And then just to reiterate a point I made a moment ago about the funding and support that's there for people studying lifelong and life-wide, the funding and fees support in Wales is significantly better than other parts of the UK, and Student Finance Wales and Careers Wales can give you details of the support that is available. So I hope that through those links and those titles that you'll be able to get information, if that's what you want, about what's available next in your career, if that's what you're planning to do.